The African night is absolute dark. It's a warm, soft, velvet night. A noisy night of busy insects, foraging animals, and murmuring humanity. The countryside is still lit mostly by wood fires and oil lamps, the towns by the occasional headlamp, and the empty roads by a lone overnight truck. The city has its fluorescent tubes, and the coast sometimes lit by the ghostly glare of oil flares. The day just starts. The sun just ambushes the night, jumping out from behind its own shadow and flaring the day into being. Trade has always defined the coastal regions of Africa, and long before Europeans arrived, the Chinese, Indians and Arabs all had been regular visitors to the east coast of the continent. And today, in every small town or city, Ghana starts its day amongst the unbelievable noise, smell and vitality of its dawn markets. Hundreds of thousands of years after some of us had left the Rift Valley in eastern Africa, we Europeans returned to this little beach here. And we came because we'd heard rumours of incredible spices, and our Arab neighbours had told us that gold grew like carrots in the field. You just had to pick it up. And it was true. Modern-day Ghana was and is full of gold. So began the baleful history of trade between Africa and the rest of the world, because in the end, to their eternal shame, ultimately what the Africans had to sell was their own people. And to our eternal shame, we bought them. Africans had always traded people, slaves, amongst themselves. When you're chronically underpopulated and can't sustain yourselves as a community, well then, you raid for them, or buy them, or both. As the British Empire grew, workers were needed there also, so they came here and built this place, Cape Coast Castle. The history of slavery is complex and unexpected, but one thing's for sure, it was refined to an industrial science in places like this. Prisoners, some of them as tiny as 6 or 8, would have already journeyed in chains for hundreds of miles before they arrived here. Now it's cool and damp and empty. But then thousands of people crammed these small spaces, and in the unbearable heat of the day, it was hellish, filthy and stinking. This little gutter being the only source of sanitation for all of these rooms. And they sat here filled with terror and choked with despair. Unlike the trade that these rooms were instrumental in, they still stink. is still filled with an ineradicable and awful sadness. Some commentators have suggested that 400 years of terror through slavery have given the Africans an unshakable fatalism that clouds everything they think and hinders their economic development. I didn't notice. Whatever they may or may not be carrying around inside their heads, they're carrying everything else on top of it. At the market in Accra, the capital of Ghana, everything is traded. Everything is for sale, even newspaper articles and reputations. The now liberated press of Africa is not just free, it is deliriously, exuberantly, irresponsibly free. The other day I read about a businessman. He was a thug, a thief and a fraud. And the next day I read in the same paper about the same man, except now he was a saint and a giant of sound business sense. The man in question had simply gone to the owner, slipped him a couple of £100 and had a new article written. But I need to go on a journey and I need to find a ride. And buses go almost anywhere.
Hello.
Does it work?
Yes.
How much is it?
This will be 45,000.
45,000?
Quality.
Is there a lifetime guarantee with this radio? That's £3 for everything. Don't laugh. £3. It's terrible. I have to buy the thing now. But I'd forgotten about the African concept of elastic time. For us, time is a fixed moment. I'll be there at 3. In Africa, the moment you arrive is when you'll be there. Mavis, when is the bus going?
If the bus full of people, will go.
When it's full of people. But is there no timetable?
No.
So we can sit here all day? Africans experience time very differently. It's not something marked by a clock. Here, time is made by people. Asking what time does the bus leave means nothing, because the bus will obviously leave when it's full. Having said all that, I'm going to get a taxi. You go to Lagos?
Lagos, Benin.
Yeah, I'm going to Benin. What cars are?
This one is 200,000.
Are the brakes working on that?
I'm not sure.
What do you mean you're not sure?
This one is very good, you know.
Okay. This is more expensive.
Yeah, expensive, yeah. 160,000 cedis.
Okay. And brakes work?
Everything is correct, no problem.
Sure?
I'm sure, no problem.
Let's go. 160,000. That's about £10 for a 300-mile trip. Should take about 12 hours.
Hey, guy, where's Amigo?
My driver's name is Ozzy. It's a long journey and thankfully he doesn't seem to talk too much. Ozzy and I are heading east down the old slave road between Benin and Ghana. It was as busy then as it is now. Even before the Europeans arrived, it is estimated that 60% of the African economy was based on slavery. Sweet dreams, baby. How long must I dream? When are you going to get air conditioning? When the wheel was invented somewhere in Central Asia, it didn't take long for it to travel all the way across Western Europe, where it would have the same applications in the West as it did in the East. You can make my dreams come true. But that's not true of Africa. What's the point in inventing or developing the wheel in the desert or in the rainforest jungles? You simply couldn't use it. So because there was no wheel transport, there were no roads. And when the first cars arrived here in the 20th century, there was nowhere to go to. Roads are a novelty still in Africa, and at best a few decades old. Most people simply just walk. I think the exhaust is gone.
Yeah, I know. It's cold.
Cars aren't second-hand here. They're fourth, fifth and sixth-hand. But how long will it take?
Oh, it will take them about 10 minutes.
He's welding underneath the car.
10 or 15 minutes, you will finish it.
This isn't the disposable society. In poverty, nothing is wasted. Cars aren't expected to work, and that's why you get the best mechanics in the world every 100 yards. Breakdowns or pit stops. This unscheduled stop of Aussies happened here in the town of Bisiassi. That's the local language name for the cola nut. Oh yeah, while I was here they made me a king, which is cool. You can grow more or less anything in Ghana. This is a cocoa pod, or in normal language, your chocolate bar with the organic wrapper still on it. Europe has been trading with Africa for some 550 years now. But for thousands of years before that, Africa was doing business with its northern neighbours, the Arabs. And the Arabs made the long, hot and dangerous journey south for four things: gold, ivory, slaves, all for the rich man. But maybe more valuable for the common man, they came south for this little nut here. This is the cola nut. It's an astringent, a thirst quencher, pretty useful in the desert during the hot days of the North African sun. It acts to keep you going in the same way that tea and coffee works for us. In the 1880s, an American chemist called John Pemberton heard about this little nut. So he mixed it up with a sugary syrup, and he took the diet of the Incas, the coca leaf, and he put that in his drink. And from the Incas, he took the word coca, and from the Africans, he took the word cola. And 500 million people will drink a Coca-Cola this week and take a little bit of this forest inside themselves. This place not only does the cola, it does the coca part as well. Not the white wired South American marching powder variety. In fact, it's exact opposite. This is the brown powder we mix with milk and sugar in order to go to sleep when we go to bed at night. This is the cocoa bean, this is chocolate. And lying here roasting in the sun, it smells delicious, and if you eat one even in this raw state, it tastes like the darkest, bitterest chocolate you've ever had. So forget Willy Wonka, this is the real chocolate factory. And the question is, if this farm produces bananas, pineapples, apples, oranges, coconuts, the cola nut and the cocoa bean, and it sells it to the biggest companies in the planet, how come these people don't live in villas on the Riviera or something? Hello. The real money in trade is in finished goods, so a lump of iron ore is worth little, but a knife made from that lump is worth a lot more. Cocoa beans are worth a bit, but cocoa powder to drink is worth a lot more. But Africans aren't allowed to sell us that powder without being taxed so heavily we can't afford to buy it. Those are our trade rules, and they're wrong. They stop these people being able to do anything except grow stuff at prices we control. They can never can their pineapples or juice their oranges or send us their cocoa powder. They'll always live in huts and never on the Riviera, even if they wanted to. But if there's few roads and little rail, how do you get trading goods to the towns or ports? And if we don't let you trade with us, and you can't trade between yourselves, how do you earn money? Religion is the big growth politics around the world, and it's particularly true here in Africa. Islam is huge in the north, evangelical Christianity massive across Central and Southern Africa. But the traditional African religions are growing too. They've even become missionary, with branches in New York, London, Liverpool and Paris. And here in Ouida, you have the Vatican City of Voodoo, one of the greatest and biggest of the African religions. Voodoo seems spooky to us because of movies of ecstatic, sweating faces, pounding drums and blood. In fact, it's a great example of our normal misunderstanding of African thought. We don't get it, so we fear it. There's no Bible, Quran or Talmud in African religions. They never left behind their histories or stories because they didn't need writing. They didn't need books or papers when they were constantly moving. There was nothing for us to study. We couldn't speak the many languages, so we couldn't get inside their heads. All we saw was the blood. In fact, Voodoo is a wholly understandable religion with a full theology like any of the great religions we are familiar with. But aside from the high priestess being a babe with awesome spiritual powers, I was as bored as I was when a kid in Ireland at another ritual of blood and sacrifice, the Mass. How many times have you done this trip? All the way to Lagos?
Month, I feel go like 4.
4?
Every month.
Every month you do it 4 times?
4 times a month. Go, come, go, come.
Like I said earlier, nothing is wasted in Africa. These beautiful bottles came here filled with Nigerian cooking oil. Now they're a petrol station. 9/10 of the African economy is informal. That is, most of the money earned is unregulated, no taxes paid, which means few schools or hospitals. The problem is people earn so little here that the amount of money that could be collected in tax wouldn't even be enough to pay for the whole tax collecting structure. The epicenter of slavery on the west coast of Africa was the kingdom of Dahomey. They were beyond cruelty and brutality. And their most exquisitely refined instrument of cruelty was a battalion of 20,000 women whom the Europeans believed were the Amazon warriors of legend. The kings of Dahomey used voodoo to impose fear, but the people in turn used voodoo to protect themselves. And in this most mercantile of cultures, it was a spiritual trade-off, a psychological exchange. We know of only one place where people were safe. Gambier, a town without a single brick or steel joint, a sanctuary, an African Venice, built completely on and above the water. The name Ganvier itself means peace at last. The Amazons and their fellow warriors were afraid of water. They had some spiritual taboo against crossing it. So the people in this area got into their dugouts and rowed out into the middle of this lake and built themselves a stilt city in which their descendants still live. Slavery can be seen as a terrible enforced economic migration from the traditional homelands. But today, there is another vast economic migration out of the country and into the city. Africa is roughly 67% rural today, but within only 25 years, that figure will have reversed itself. By 2030, most Africans will have moved to town. It might take me a bit longer. The cities of Africa are the fastest growing in the world. There aren't enough homes there. There aren't enough jobs, sanitation or power. You exchange a poverty of opportunity in the country for a poverty of circumstance in the city. Most people in poor countries own absolutely nothing at all. So if you own something, it gives you a huge advantage. Own a bottle and you become a garage owner. Own a pot and you can cook in it and sell the food. And if you can save up to $2, 1,000 francs in local money, and buy one of these yellow shirts, then you could become a taxi driver. And on Cotonou is the capital of Benin, a country which in the past was the main West Coast source of slavery. It hasn't changed. Even now, in the 21st century, 5,000 children are sold into slavery each year by impoverished parents. They disappear into the chocolate plantations of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, or the homes of the rich as servants. Can anyone watching this imagine poverty so awful that all you can do is sell your children? When Europeans and Africans first encountered each other, we met more or less as equals. But it was the discovery of the new colonies of the Americas and their need for labour that original understanding was perverted into the grotesque mass trade of human beings that resonates still today through our psychologies and our politics.
There was, however, one gloriously bright moment amidst all this tragedy. Forced into hiding, voodoo, their religion, became secret and feared by those who didn't understand it. One place allowed these unfree, non-humans to practice their religious drumming. On Congo Square every Sunday in New Orleans, crowds would gather to hear the drummers invest every beat with an infinite soul. Soon others joined in, while the ladies of the town, drenched in their jasmine perfume, looked on. And it was from the beauty of these women and their perfume that the musicians gave this new music its word. From jasmine, we get the name jazz. From unimaginable brutality, they had created, in one of the greatest acts of defiance in human history, the music that was a soaring, glorious prayer to the unbowed, free human spirit.
Slavery was the long, dark night of Africa, the nightmare you wake from with relief. I heard a preacher here quote the Bible. What of the night? The morning comes. And as another soft African night begins to fall along this beautiful freighted coast of merchants and traders, I get the feeling that dawn could be already here for Africa. And you know what? It looks like it'll be a glorious day.